My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 28 years old. If someone had told me that a 10-second video would destroy my parents' reputation and completely change my life, I would have laughed. But that's exactly what happened. Growing up, my parents cared about one thing more than anything else: status. They judged people by the cars they drove, the neighborhoods they lived in, and the titles printed on their business cards. Love, kindness, and loyalty never seemed to matter. I learned that lesson early. When I met Jake, he worked as a security guard at a large office building in downtown Chicago. He wasn't rich. He didn't wear expensive suits. He didn't own a luxury car, but he treated everyone with respect, from the CEO walking through the front doors to the janitor finishing the night shift. That was the man I fell in love with. When I finally introduced Jake to my parents, the dinner became one of the most uncomfortable nights of my life. "So," my father asked while cutting his steak, "when are you planning to get a real career?" Jake smiled politely. "I actually enjoy my job, sir." My mother forced a fake smile. "I'm sure it's temporary." Jake stayed calm. "No, ma'am, I'm happy where I am." The rest of dinner felt like an interrogation. How much did he make? Did he own a house? Did he have investments? Could he even afford to support a family? Jake answered every question respectfully. On the drive home, I apologized. "I'm so sorry." He simply squeezed my hand. "They don't have to approve of me. I only need you." That's when I knew I was going to marry him. A year later, he proposed by the lake where we had our first date. It wasn't expensive. There were no fireworks, just him, a simple ring, and tears in both our eyes. I said yes before he even finished asking. When we announced our engagement, my parents didn't congratulate us. Instead, my mother sighed. "Emily, you're making a huge mistake." Dad added, "You're throwing your future away." Over the next few months, they tried everything. They introduced me to wealthy businessmen. They offered to pay for graduate school if I ended the relationship. They even suggested postponing the wedding until I came to my senses. Nothing worked. So they made one final decision. They refused to attend the wedding. Not just them. They convinced nearly every close relative to boycott it too. My aunt called crying, "I'm sorry, Emily. Your parents say this wedding will embarrass the family." One by one, invitations were declined. By the week of the wedding, nearly 70% of my family wasn't coming. I cried harder than I ever had before. Jake wrapped his arms around me. "We don't need a crowd. We just need each other." On our wedding day, the ceremony was beautiful. The empty seats hurt, but the people who truly loved us were there. Jake looked at me as if I were the only person in the world. And honestly, that was enough. After the ceremony, our friends filled the dance floor. Everyone laughed. Everyone celebrated. For the first time in months, I forgot about my parents. Until my phone buzzed. A cousin had sent me a social media notification. My stomach dropped. My mother had posted publicly, "Some children choose money problems over family values. We refuse to support a terrible decision." Thousands of people liked the post. Hundreds left comments praising my parents for standing up for their principles. I wanted to ignore it, but then another message arrived. It contained a 10-second video. No explanation, just one sentence. "You need to watch this." I pressed play. And within 10 seconds, I realized my parents had made a mistake they could never take back. I tapped the video with shaking hands. It started inside an upscale country club just 3 nights before my wedding. The camera wasn't steady, like someone had secretly recorded it with a phone resting on the table. Then my parents walked into the frame. My father laughed as he greeted several wealthy guests. One man asked, "So, are you really skipping your daughter's wedding?" Dad chuckled. "Absolutely. Maybe she'll learn that marrying beneath her has consequences." Everyone around the table laughed. Then my mother leaned forward and said something that made my stomach twist. "She'll come crawling back once she realizes love doesn't pay the bills." Another burst of laughter filled the room. I felt sick. These weren't private comments made in frustration. They were proud of what they were doing. Then came the final 5 seconds. A businessman raised his glass and joked, "Imagine choosing a security guard over a millionaire." My father clinked his glass and smiled. "That's why she's no longer our responsibility." The video ended. 10 seconds. That was all it took. I couldn't breathe. Jake quietly took my phone and watched the clip himself. He looked at me, not angry, not embarrassed, just heartbroken. "I'm sorry, Emily." I wiped away my tears. "No." I shook my head. "You have nothing to apologize for." The next morning, my cousin called. I recorded it. "What? I couldn't believe what Uncle David and Aunt Linda were saying. I started recording because I knew no one would believe me. Why didn't you tell me before? I was scared. But after seeing your mom's Facebook post, I couldn't stay quiet. For a few hours, I debated whether to post the video. Part of me wanted revenge. The other part just wanted peace. Jake sat beside me on the couch. If you post it, he said gently, don't do it because you're angry. Do it because the truth deserves to be heard. That sentence changed everything. I wasn't trying to destroy them. They had done that themselves. I uploaded the 10-second clip with one simple caption. This is why my parents missed my wedding. Nothing more. Within an hour, the views climbed into the thousands. Friends began sharing it. Then strangers. By evening, it had over 500,000 views. The comments completely flipped. So they abandoned their daughter? Status means more than family? I feel terrible for this couple. People who had praised my parents just the day before were now deleting their comments. Some even apologized publicly. Local community pages picked up the story. A podcast shared the clip. Then a popular family relationship creator reacted to it, calling my parents' behavior one of the coldest things I've ever seen. By the second day, the video had millions of views. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. My parents called 12 times. I didn't answer. Then they texted, Dad, take the video down immediately. Mom, you're humiliating this family. I stared at the messages in disbelief. Not once did they ask if I was okay. Not once did they apologize. They only cared that people had seen who they really were. Jake looked over my shoulder. What are you going to do? I locked my phone. Nothing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to protect them from the consequences of their own actions. But neither of us realized that the biggest twist was still coming. 3 days later, someone from my father's company saw the video. And what happened next was something none of us could have predicted. 3 days after the video went viral, my father's phone started ringing nonstop. At first, he ignored the calls. Then his assistant left him a voicemail. Mr. Carter, the board wants to meet with you immediately. He had spent over 20 years building his reputation as a respected financial executive. His company promoted family values, integrity, and leadership. The viral clip was spreading everywhere, and people were asking why one of the company's senior leaders was publicly humiliating his own daughter. By the end of the day, my father was placed on administrative leave while the company reviewed the situation. For the first time in my life, his status couldn't protect him. Meanwhile, my mother was dealing with her own consequences. She was president of an exclusive charity organization that constantly talked about compassion and community. Members began resigning after recognizing her from the video. Sponsors quietly pulled their donations. People who once begged to sit at her table suddenly stopped returning her calls. Everything they had built on appearances was beginning to collapse. Then something unexpected happened. A black SUV pulled into our driveway. Jake looked through the window. I think they're here. My heart sank. My parents stepped out. For a moment, I hoped they had finally come to apologize. I opened the door. Neither of them smiled. Dad spoke first. You've made your point. I stared at him. My point? Take the video down. Mom crossed her arms. People are judging us because of you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Because of me? You recorded yourselves insulting your own daughter. You skipped my wedding. You laughed about it. And somehow this is my fault? Dad's face turned red. You embarrassed this family. Before I could answer, Jake calmly stepped beside me. I think it's time for you both to leave. Dad laughed sarcastically. Stay out of this. You're just a security guard. Jake didn't react. Instead, he smiled. You still think that's all I am? Dad frowned. What does that mean? Jake reached into his pocket and handed him a business card. Dad looked down. His expression changed instantly. The color drained from his face. Mom grabbed the card from his hand. Her eyes widened. You... Jake nodded politely. Yes. For years, Jake had worked security, but not because he had no ambition. He owned the private security company. He had started it with one truck, one employee, and a dream after leaving the military. Instead of sitting in an office, he still worked security shifts beside his employees because he believed good leaders never asked others to do what they wouldn't do themselves. His company now protected corporate headquarters, hospitals, sports arenas, and celebrity events across 3 states. He had over 400 employees, and the company was worth several $1 million. My parents had never bothered to ask. They had judged him the moment they heard the words security guard. Dad looked completely speechless. You own the company? Jake nodded. I always have. Mom whispered. Why didn't you tell us? Jake answered without anger. Because I wanted you to know me for my character. You never gave me that chance. Silence filled the driveway. For the first time, my parents had nothing to say. Their entire opinion of Jake had been based on his uniform, not the man wearing it. My father looked at me. His voice was quieter now. Emily, we made a mistake. I took a deep breath. No, you made hundreds of choices. You judged the man I love. You abandoned your daughter. And when you were exposed, you didn't come here to apologize. You came here to protect your reputation. Neither of them could deny it. Jake gently took my hand. We should go inside. As we closed the front door, I looked back one last time. My parents were standing alone in the driveway. For the first time in their lives, money, status, and pride couldn't open the door that love had already closed. A month passed. The internet eventually moved on to the next viral story, but our lives had changed forever. Jake and I settled into our new home, far away from the drama. For the first time in years, I woke up every morning feeling peaceful. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my aunt. Your parents want to see you. They say they're ready to apologize. I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part wondered if people could really change. Jake looked at me and smiled gently. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. A week later, I agreed to meet them at a quiet coffee shop. When I walked in, they looked different. Older, tired, almost defeated. The confidence they had always carried was gone. My father stood as I approached. Thank you for coming. I sat down without saying a word. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Finally, my mother broke the silence. We were wrong. Those 3 words were something I had waited years to hear. Tears filled her eyes. We spent our whole lives believing success was measured by money and status. We judged Jake without ever knowing him. We hurt you. My father lowered his head. I've replayed that video 100 times. But what haunts me isn't what I said. It's the smile on my face while I was saying it. For the first time, I believed they understood. Not because they had lost their jobs, not because people criticized them, but because they had finally seen themselves through someone else's eyes. Dad reached into his jacket and placed a small envelope on the table. Inside was a handwritten letter. I don't expect forgiveness today. I only wanted you to know how deeply sorry I am. I failed as a father. I chose pride over my daughter. I hope one day you'll let me earn a place back in your life. I folded the letter carefully, and I looked at both of them. I forgive you. Relief washed over their faces. But before they could speak, I continued. Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't rebuild trust overnight. That takes time. And whether we ever become a family again depends on your actions, not your words. Both of them nodded. They finally understood. As I stood to leave, my mother quietly asked, "How's Jake?" I smiled. He's exactly the same man you refused to meet. Kind, honest, and best husband I could have ever asked for. A few months later, Jake and I celebrated our first wedding anniversary. There were no luxury hotels, no expensive parties, just a small cabin by a lake, the same place where he had proposed. As we watched the sunset, Jake wrapped his arm around me. Any regrets? He asked. I smiled. Only one. What's that? I wish I'd stopped trying to earn my parents' approval years ago. He kissed my forehead. You don't need anyone's approval to be happy. Looking out across the water, I realized he was right. The greatest revenge had never been exposing my parents. It wasn't the viral video. It wasn't the millions of views. It wasn't their public embarrassment. The greatest revenge was building a life so full of love, peace, and happiness that their opinions no longer had the power to hurt me. Sometimes people think revenge is about making someone suffer, but the sweetest revenge is proving that you can succeed without becoming like the people who tried to break you. And every time I look at my husband, the man they once mocked as just a security guard, I'm reminded that the richest person in the room isn't the one with the most money. It's the one surrounded by genuine love.